I read the news this week.
Well, look, the big thing, GPT-5, it's going to hopefully be released. A little bit coy about when that will be exactly. But there was a Sam. I don't know if I haven't watched the full interview with Lex Friedman and Sam
Uh,
Altman, but
yeah, I couldn't handle another 3 hours of Sam. So,
yeah,
but
that's one of my things that I'd love to kind of. But look, I think the next release will be interesting. You know, could be sort of in the middle of the year, but things like once again, these models are getting bigger, larger parameter sizes, multimodal, and they're saying the big thing with this one is we're going to shift from being chatbots to agents. So going and doing something, and I think this is probably that next step of actually going and do something. And to your point around search and like this is going to take us to that next level of actionable things, not just giving you some results. We're going and doing something with that. So, look, I think that's it'll be interesting to see what they do, and I think I think this is the race. We're going to probably start to have a few players now, and that commoditization of the large language models and Claude and some of those other tools are equally, they're on a performance basis are doing a lot more. But I think right now we're going to just have a few horses running in this. What's your sort of take on what they're doing or where you see that going?
I'm very excited about the ChatGPT 5. I'm looking forward to it already. I'm thinking, is that the reason why they fired him? Is it ChatGPT 5? Is that it's like if when we see 5 and we understand what happened there, is that's going to be the secrets?
Are you talking about the firing of Sam Altman?
Yeah, yeah. They were allegedly there was AGI risks that he wasn't tuned to. That's why the whole saga happened there. And you look at ChatGPT 4, 4.4, 4.5, you go like that. That's not it. So it has to be either Sora or 5.
Well, we'll soon find out. Like I say, I think they'll get more. They'll kind of tease a little bit more, but I think the fact that it's coming is exciting. I think everyone's just trying to up each other, and I think I soon will feel like this won't be a thing. It'll just be new features like we have, you know, iOS and we have Android or we have different operating systems. I think we're going to have a few base models really because I, I don't think the proliferation can keep going with more and more models, like with tens of providers or hundreds of providers. But so I think this will start to narrow, as I think it is. Probably brings interesting as well when we talk about firing, and you saw as well that Stability CEO Emad resigned, and that I think that's quite interesting as well. Seeing what he's sort of saying is focusing on this decentralized, you can't AI. What's your sort of take on that?
Sounds like a. Do you remember how like early on in Facebook journey there was some sort of, it's called diaspora, and they were raising money from. It was like an open source social network, and it was they were raising money, and even Mark Zuckerberg gave them $10,000. It was like a crowdsourcing. It was early days of Facebook, and that kind of went nowhere. So I'm not. I don't believe in the chances of success over decentralized movement against centralized companies, and capital raise, the ability the ability to capital raise and attract talent and work harder, and like you need centralized decision for that. There's a we can philosophize around centralized versus decentralized forever, right? But that sounds to me like a failure story in disguise. Am I wrong?
Oh, look, I don't know. I mean, he's one of the pioneers of particularly around these language models, both with large language models and if you look at stable diffusion and so forth, they've sort of pioneered a lot of things. So, do you think that'll make a difference to what they're doing, or what's your sort of thoughts there?
I think that that part of image generation is kind of commoditized, and like every cloud service provider is now going to offer that as a feature. So see what happened to inflection. Yeah, do you want to talk about what happened to inflection AI real quick?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're once again, there's a movement of talent in the AI space, and yeah, what happened there?
Is it, or is it just asset sale?
Yeah, I mean, I know that's been talked about a bit. That I guess for those who don't know, I guess Microsoft have bought essentially the talent from Inflection AI, and the question is, what does that mean? For me as well, like that's interesting to go. The company exists, but all the people don't work there anymore. So that's like an interesting play on what that is. And I think we've heard from a few people talking about whether that's a a way of getting around all the sort of anti-competitive things that are out there. But look, I think that particularly the co-founder Mustafa Suleiman is a really smart guy. In fact, for those of you out there, he's written a great book. I think I really love the book that he's written called The Coming Wave. And to me, that's a really great book in terms of written 2023 around the way he sees the future of technology with multiple, not just AI, but we're talking around synthetic biology and so forth. And so I think that'll be interesting to see what they do. And Microsoft have got a really pretty strong team there that they're bringing in. So look, once again, I think Microsoft are doing really well on that side of things, of those relationships and building that in. And we're going to see the other side of the fence. People trying to do the similar things. But I think they're making some really good strategic acquisitions, either of talent. But I don't know that means they're always going to win, because they're buying it all in. It doesn't mean that they're developing it from within as well. So
I think Microsoft is on a good trajectory. Basically, using AI cloud services as a way to enhance their cloud.
yeah,
And they have lots of tools. They have the cloud. So now cloud providers needs to offer AI language models. They're gonna buy a bunch of them and offer them. I think that is also interesting. It's not great returns. They paid 650 mil. They got essentially, it says, some sort of licensing deal that makes inflection models available for sales on the software giants Azure cloud services. And according to a person involved in the transaction, the startup is using the licensing fee to help provide its investors with a modest return on their capital. So like 650 million, that's a modest return on capital. I think that just shows you how much money in this business is going into hardware and like CPU churning, which is all this money goes to, at the end, to inflate the stock of NVIDIA. That's one good way to think about where the value flow. So not the greatest news for venture capitalists who are interested in AI, in my opinion.
yeah, interesting. So speaking of Nvidia, I don't know if you've seen, there's they want this sort of Hippocratic AI, and Nvidia are all about these chatbots around handling your healthcare, or nurses being deployed with that. I don't know if you've seen. But yeah, these sort of voice-based healthcare agents, and they sort of believe that that's going to be the way people will want to be, I guess, treated or triaged, or being able to, I guess, take down the cost of having nurses and using this. So they have some interesting videos around how they're using that. Do you think that'll take off? Do you think people will use that? I mean, we're seeing that same interactivity in other areas, but yeah, what do you sort of think about that? And to your point, Nvidia are wanting to do this because of the hardware side of it as well.
I think if you ask me, will in the future people talk to AI as part of healthcare? The answer is yes. I think so. It's like saying, in the future people will communicate with the doctors via emails or via telehealth. How exactly it's going to happen? Well, it's one version of the science fiction, so it's going to be one of those versions. It will take off, in my opinion.
Well, so that's what these Hippocratic AI are doing, kind of working in this space. So I think it'll be interesting to see what they do.
I want to talk about BBC developing AI plans to take over their archives. So generative AI, imagine generative AI that's been trained on BBC News archives, both video and what do you make of it? Fun?
I need to know more about the context. So you're saying they're training everything off their archives?
They're training an LLM on their archive.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
It's I think of it as it's another argument that generative AI goes and start replacing search, right? So you switch back 25 years ago, you would see an article that BBC is offering the archive to Google to be able to, everybody can search, right? So it's the same type of news, I think, for the current modern era. It's not big. It's not a big deal. I just think it's an interesting development. Again, strengthening the thesis that generative AI and large language model are just a more efficient and effective than just information retrieval in the form of like Google style. Here's that item, because they synthesize the information and answer questions. It reminds me that when I used to run Smart Smarter, we actually had a contact at BBC to see if we can use their videos in our product.
Yeah.
So
No,
I'm
I
surprised.
think you're right about well, there's a lot of misinformation. So I think being able to use that and ask questions from a trusted source, yeah, it will replace a lot of search
It
or
does require you to trust the BBC.
yeah, that's what I'm getting at. So if there, I think this
Can
is one of
argue
the
about
things
that.
though. Those news sites that are trusted are going to become more valuable because there's just all this other AI generated news that isn't real as well. And so, yeah, look, I think that's going to happen more and more. The question is, does it make the BBC more valuable in what they're doing there, or will just everybody just normal all the news? I think this is the thing is almost everyone will have to do it. If they do it, then everyone else will have to do it, and that will become the normal way. All news sites will have this as an option. So um, I think the thing is the good thing about that is you'll be able to digest however you want. Do you want short form, long form? There won't be a form. You'll have your own way of getting the news as you want it. So I think that could be pretty cool.
It's also interesting, right? Because it's kind of strengthening the notion that, like, as soon as you've got an item and you need to summarize it, right? So you're saying, okay, look, I've got all the access to all the news from the last few years, or to 80 years ago, whatever, and then summarize about this trend or that trend. There is no objective way to do that without bias. Like, the act of paraphrasing, analysis, and summarizing is editorial act of that has bias inherent in it. And I expect there will be infinite stream of news about how you asked, that bot or this bot question, and it was biased in the same way that Google Gemini was was doing ridiculous things in the last few weeks. And I think it's just like we have to, George Orwell understood it when he wrote 1984, that, like, his Ministry of Truth was all about, rewriting history. What's rewriting if not paraphrasing and resummarizing and so forth? So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what's coming out of that.
Yep, yeah. And look, I just go. This is about will be about personalization as well. So you'll have your own news with your own bias, maybe even as well, and maybe you can have a little. Hey, I want it more left wing,
I
right
want to feel
wing.
good today.
Whatever
Give me
your
something
bias is,
positive. I
it
like
can
it.
it can give you that, increasing the filter bubbles we already have. So yeah, yeah,
We'll see about that. Yeah.
yeah. So WorldCoin have this technology. It's called Orb.
Hi, it's Dror. If you like this video, please consider sharing it.
I like that troll. I'm going to share it. They've sort of open sourced their technology, and it's around being able to give individual way to prove that they're human and that it's not an AI generated image. So it's kind of using this technology to look at that. And what they want to do is open source that. And by open sourcing it, it means this sort of technology be available to people to use to kind of hope that, obviously what they want is that to be a standard for being able to identify human human images or identity. So yeah, I think it's interesting what they're doing. What's your sort of thinking around that? We talk about identity a lot. Do you think this is a sort of solution that could work?
I think they have a bit of a brand problem. Like, you Google their website, it's not clear what problem I'm on their website. It's not clear what problem they're solving. Is this a new way of doing identity management for everyone? So just say it. Instead, they're like 5 years, like they've been talking about, like, the need in the future to know who's fake and who's real. Okay, but what's the product you're actually doing here? It's like, I think they're like, a bridge too far in terms of their marketing and positioning for most humans, for most people. So it's still not 100% clear, how what they're doing, how successful. How do you measure this? I get, broadly speaking, the idea of what they're trying to do, but I can't tell you. I completely get it, and I know how to measure whether or not they're meeting their objectives. Do you?
Look, I kind of get it in terms of what they're trying to do, which is why I thought that was interesting around privacy. So being able to validate all of these things around identity with privacy, security, and that sort of verifiability in there. So transparency and verify. So that's what I think they have as an open source. I haven't obviously played with it, but I think it's interesting to see some of these solutions will start to come out. Whether this will be the one that people adopt is interesting, and I think they're sort of doing this as they have this tools for humanity project. So they're trying to do it as a service to help people. And if you sort of look at that tools for humanity, it's like it's just sort of trying to build out some of these things that aren't necessarily there to make money, but to give solve these problems around identity and fraud. And I think it is interesting. Just whether it'll take off. But people are going to want to control that, and I think this is the hard thing with all this technology. Every big player wants to own that technology, because if you own that technology, there's obviously a big
You
advantage.
mean identity management?
Yeah, Yeah.
Active Directory, right? Have you? It's been around for 40 years, right? More.
Yeah, but so this is founded by so Sam Altman's one of the
One of the investors.
founders of this, so of Tools for Humanity at least, and so I think that's an interesting thing as well. That he's, you know, I guess got his fingers in a few pies as well, and I think that'll be interesting to see if that can take off, and then equally the relationship with Microsoft in that if that does take off, and I guess it's separate to OpenAI, but yeah, I think it's an interesting one to see. So I'd love to probably dig a bit deeper into what they're doing. All right, should we just run through some of the raises that have been going on as well?
Yes, I like raises.
Yeah, cool. So, HeyGen is a company I've kind of played around with a bit around AI generated images and avatars. I kind of find my avatars a bit creepy, but it works. But yeah, look, they just raised 60 mil, take the valuation to 440 mil. Once again, there's a proliferation of all of these AI generated avatars and videos, and so I really just once again, this is going to become a baseline functionality. So it'll be interesting to see if these companies can maintain their valuations, or whether this will just become standard offerings. And companies like HeyGen or DID and some of the other ones, because I'm seeing more and more people come up with this kind of technology. But look, they've raised another 60 mil. They do have a great product. It's just whether to me, once again, that's just going to be available to people.
It's still hard to judge from outside whether or not that category, where is it heading, right? So on the one hand, those investors who invested in it early have an interest in basically keep funding it to make that the winning horse in that particular race.
Yeah.
And those who didn't invest in it all want to see this kind of saying, oh yeah, there's a lot of horses in that race, it's not clear, and so forth, because they're out of the game.
Well,
it's kind of too early unless you like really have a seat on the table of those in those particular market niches to know where it's heading. I would say, video is definitely a massive category, and you can think about a lot of exit opportunities there. And if you find a niche with a market fit, that's what I'm saying. It's video is big, and there's like if you find a niche in there, that can be a unicorn. So just to them, well done.
Yeah, cool. What other raises we had this week?
We see here Cherish Health raised 26 mil. Appears to set raise 30 mil more in Series B. The bid to bring its AI-powered fall detection software to market. I don't know what it is. Do you know about Cherish Health?
Yeah, I think it's around this sort of fall. If people fall, being able to kind of detect what's happening and alert people.
So it seems to be like a product that sits at your home, and if you fell, you can talk to it or whatever, and it saves. It calls ambulance. Isn't that what Apple Watch does already?
A couple other quick raises. CoreWeave, AI-powered computing provider. They raised an undisclosed amount, but they're sort of talking about their valuation being around 16 bill, which is doubling its value from last year. So, what's exciting about this is seeing companies' valuations, seeing that opportunity. Which is why I think it's really interesting to be investing in this space.
Interesting. GPU cloud. CoreWeave is a specialized cloud provider delivering a massive scale of NVIDIA GPU on top of an industry fastest and more flexible infrastructure. So it's basically like a hardware layer play.
Yeah.
You want to train, come train on CoreWeave.
Yeah, but I think, look, we're in this very first phase of where hardware, that's the easy play, right? This is where we're seeing a lot of the valuations go up. I think phase 2 will be around the solutions. And, that's probably more where we will play. But I do feel like, this is why, companies like this are doing really well. So
it just reminds me of Heroku. Heroku is one of those kind of independent cloud providers got bought by Salesforce. And you can run your application on Heroku. And it's a dedicated cloud for cloud application. Basically, that was like a dedicated infrastructure for cloud application. They were relatively new before everybody in the system had one. And this seems to me a dedicated cloud for GPU, like basically AI applications. Interesting. So this is definitely a kind of infrastructure play.
Yeah. Look, Aussie news, CSIRO report about the new era of AI in healthcare, which I guess a report just highlighting the surge of AI use in healthcare, driven by that sort of digital data and compute. I think this is a no-brainer that it's going to happen. I think it's really around the speed of how quickly that can happen. But it really talked a little bit about, the treatment, admin tasks, just how AI will be used in there, and just the need for digitization there. We've seen some investments where working with unstructured data in healthcare has been a challenge. But yeah, I think that's an interesting report just to say, how that's going to sort of happen from an Australian perspective. Um, Another one of my favorite things is the tennis. So I've just come back from the Formula One, actually, from Melbourne just now. But the tennis is another big thing that happens in Melbourne every year. And so Australian Open, one of their sponsors is Infosys, and so they're going to use AI next year in what they're doing around fan engagement, player performance, and digital content creation. So I think that'll be really cool. I'm excited about seeing that. So predictive game challenges, all these sorts of things, win predictors. I think, and also just sort of graffiti inspired AI art displays. So I reckon that'll be fun. So to see how that's going to sort of be out at events. And we had our Dazed and Diffused in Melbourne, for example. We had this AI generated video playing in the background that was generating itself. And I think that maybe more and more we're going to see at more events where this is just going to be a way of interacting with people. People are going to start to see some interesting things happening.
I see an article that Aussies are dismissing the impact of their generative AI on their profession, and it says with a noticeable gap in understanding its potential and actual application in various job roles. But on the flip of that, I see a lot of articles about people coming out and showing how how AI is now enhancing and advancing some strategy development for consumers. And I think it's just a classic case of like some people realizing they can become more productive and telling others. And then they said AI is not going to take a job. A guy with AI will take your job, right? So I buy that, and I think it's like an article from 25 years ago. Oh, Google is changing the way we do accounting. Yeah, okay, whatever it is, Google will change it, of course, because you have access to the whole internet. So I think if you have the access to this engine that intelligent engine, obviously it will change your work. I mean, these days I literally sit 11 hours a day, 10 hours a day on ChatGPT open and constantly working with it.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine someone is not doing. Someone is sitting in front of a computer and not. Can you imagine not using Google? No. So it's like saying, can you imagine someone sitting in front of a computer not using ChatGPT? I think it's this AI, not ChatGPT specifically.
Exactly to your point. I think we're utilizing these tools, you're more productive. We're seeing that personally in all of the things we do. But I think the interesting thing in that article was 5% of Australian businesses are completely ready to utilize it. That's what that sort of said. But it said a substantial part of the workforce and student body. So 30%, 32% of employees are sort of ready to engage. The interesting thing for me was that 58% of students. So I think the next generation of students will be the ones who will come in and revolutionize these organizations or start these smaller AI first organizations. And so I've been seeing more and more founders which are starting smaller businesses now with all of the tools integrated in everything they're doing. And I think that is the opportunity, I think, to be it's harder to disrupt large organizations and redo what the whole way you work. I think if you start off with that, I think to me that's what's going to happen. We're able to do that, being kind of just throwing these tools into every part of what we're doing. But I think that sort of larger organizations or even governments, it'll be interesting to see how they adapt to that, because this is going to be really interesting. So I kind of think people are putting this off, either head in the sand, going, I don't want to know about this. This is kind of awkward for me to think about it, because all these jobs start to change or go or evolve into something else. And so I think there's a big cultural thing that needs to happen, not just in Australia, but around how we adopt this technology. This is like the internet again. Like that's what for me it feels like. Feeling like my first business was around when the internet was kicking off in terms of real deployment, and I feel like it's the same conversations I'm having with people. One side of the party is talking about how this is going to change the way we do things. The other part are like, oh, this won't do anything. So I think this article sort of highlights that people aren't, we have this divide of what's going to happen. I don't think it's just generative AI as well. So excellent.
It was another week in AI, brought to you by Empress Capital. How's that?
Thanks for joining us on this video. We'd really love to hear from you.
We used to say, if you like the food, tell your friends. If you don't like it, tell us.